In a world where carbs are your enemy, you need one man to help you fight your battles. That man is Jimmy.
Combating nutrition disinformation and general bull. It's Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Instagram Live. And we're here with another episode of Jimmy Rants. If you're brand new to Jimmy Rants, hop on over to JimmyRants.com. You'll see that we start off this show in a very unique way because we put it in 3 different places, all ways that you can engage in the content. The first way is on Instagram. We do a couple of live videos every single day. So go follow me on Instagram at Livin' Low Carb Man. LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, you can engage live, just like all these beautiful people are doing right now, coming in and watching Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay on Instagram for 24 hours, so go watch it there. But if you're not on Instagram or if you missed the replay, never fear, we got you covered. We pop all of the archives of this show onto YouTube, which is in the 150s now in episodes. So go find the old episodes over on YouTube. Type in Jimmy Rants as a keyword search, you'll find it. Finally, we have a Jimmy Rants podcast, which has the best of the best moments of this here show, JimmyRants.com. Today's Jimmy Rants is all about a debate that I've been observing happening over the past few years as keto has risen in popularity. And it's not a new debate. It's a debate that's been out there for a little while. When I first started blogging in 2005, this was already out there. People talking about what is it in the diet that is most hunger fighting, that is most satiating. In other words, which of the macronutrients provide the best level of satiety? And of course, a lot of people don't talk about satiety as it relates to diet because, quite frankly, most diets keep you hungry that are on the low carb end and higher or low fat end, higher carb end of things. And so they don't talk about satiety because they don't want you thinking about it. But for those of us that are in the lower carb keto world, even the paleo people have talked about this, and various other ones. Satiety is a huge key as to why we eat the way we do. So then the great keto satiety debate comes down to your choice between, is it the fat or is it the protein that is most satiating? And this has always been kind of a funny debate to me, because anybody with a brain will tell you it's not one or the other. And I can tell you just from my own personal experience of doing a very high protein experiment last year. I did that, a 3-to-1 protein to fat ratio last year. And I was starving. I was starving to death, even though it was extremely high in protein. So in my N=1 test of it, eating a whole lot of protein made me hungry. And so it wasn't very satiating to me. And guys, I was eating almost like 45–50% of my calories from protein during that experiment. So that was not good. That was causing more hunger and actually did worse than that. It actually stoked hypoglycemia in me. If you want to learn more about that experiment that I did, hop over to ketohackingmd.com and go look up, just type in high protein as a keyword, and you'll see my experiment and the results. It weren't pretty. But I also did a very high fat experiment last year where I tested the boundaries of consuming fat in meals, and it was 90% fat. And while it was more satiating than the high protein, it still wasn't quite giving me the satiety that I would get on like a ketogenic approach. So that got me to thinking that why do we debate with keto that it's either the protein that gives satiation or the fat that gives satiation, when the honest answer is it's a mix of both, and it's the preponderance of which one you put emphasis on that matters. So for me, after much tinkering and testing, trying to figure out what works, for me, I've found as long as I stay between 70 and 80% in my dietary fat, and then make the rest protein, that seems to be the sweet spot for satiety. And my evidence for this is the ability to go very long periods of time without eating. Are you able to do that? Or are you getting hungrier quicker? Are you getting hungry in 6 hours after eating? Are you having a lack of satiation and you're wondering, oh my gosh, what can I do to allow my body to relax more? It has to be a mix of both. It has to be the right level. Now, 70 to 80% fat is what's good for me. Other people, and so that translates to 20 to 30% protein. Other people may need a little more protein, and that's okay. It's all good. But I think it goes down to this, you got to figure it out. You got to tinker and test. You've got to get that right mix that's for you. And the unfortunate thing is you have these camps, like we talked about on my Jimmy Rants yesterday, where people say, oh, you need higher protein. And then others say you need higher fat. And the honest answer is you need both in your diet. And then just figuring out what that level is for you is the key. So I don't understand why we have to have a debate over whether fat is more satiating or protein is more satiating, when at the end of the day, it really comes down to finding that level of both of those macronutrients that is right for you. And the key in all this too, you guys, carbohydrate restriction is the key to both. Because if you're not restricting carbohydrates well enough, then you can eat all the protein in the world, you can eat all the fat in the world, but if the carbs are too high still, you're not going to see any satiation. Carbs are the biggest saboteur to your hunger and cravings. They will stoke it like nothing else stokes it, which is why I've become more and more convinced that for most people, if they simply cut out most of those carbohydrates from their diet, if not completely eliminate them, that's going to give them benefit. Now, I want to give you an anecdotal story. Yesterday, I had one of the fattier cuts of steak that there is. So the ribeye steak is one of the more fatty cuts of steak. And I'm doing a keto carnivore experiment right now. And I had 2 pounds of ribeye steak. Now, most people would look at that and go, oh my gosh, that's way too much protein. But it's a lot of fat too. But here's the thing. It came out to about 70% fat and 30% protein. So it was on the lower end of where I'm finding the most comfort in this experiment for me, which is between 70 and 80. It was on the very low end. I tend to do really well when it's 75% fat or pushing it a little bit higher, but not above 80. But right on that border, and guess what happened? 1 hour after having 2 pounds of ribeye steak cooked in grass-fed butter, 1 hour, I was feeling hunger. And I don't usually get that way, especially after that much food. 2 pounds of steak, and I was hungry. So it goes to this thing of satiety. If it truly was higher in protein, leading that, in fact, as I was just talking to you, my stomach just growled. I didn't get quite the satiation that I got from eating fattier hamburger patties, fattier sausage, that kind of thing. It's truly amazing when you kind of figure out your own tolerance and your own ability to get satiation from the mix of macros. For me, is 75-25 is seemingly the ideal. 75% of the calories coming from fat, 25% coming from protein. That's mine. So you got to figure out what yours is. And I would say a lot of it's going to be subjective. You're going to need to tinker and test, try higher amounts of protein, see how you feel. If you feel good and you're not hungry and you're able to go many hours without eating with ease, then go for it. But for other people, they're going to have to push the fat higher and bring the protein down because protein isn't a free-for-all. So you've got to know that going into it. And if you do know that and you figure out that right mix between the fat and the protein that's going to give you that satiation, you found the nirvana that most people never, ever find on a traditional diet. So hopefully the bottom line in this Jimmy Rants is you're learning that we really shouldn't be having a debate over whether it's fat or protein that is most satiating on your ketogenic diet. It's both. And figuring out what the mix of both of those things are is your job. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Welcome in, welcome in. Thanks for being here, as always, on Jimmy Rants. Anita says, I completely agree. It is a mixture of both. And Anita, the trick is finding out what level of each one is going to give you the most satiation. And some people are like, well, that's just obsessing about it. And in general, I would agree with that assessment because I don't think you need to obsess. But if you're trying to fine tune to figure out, okay, why am I still getting hungry so soon after eating meals? This could be the little adjustment that could help you. But again, I do think carbohydrate restriction is the must here. And if people aren't restricting carbohydrates, that's going to be the big monkey wrench in trying to figure out if it's fat or protein. I think the carbs will stoke the hunger first, and then the lack thereof of either fat or protein is going to stoke the hunger secondarily. Steph says, deer meat 2 days in a row didn't satiate me. Within 90 minutes, I needed to add more fatty meat to satiety. Yeah, the other day, Steph, when you mentioned that you had some deer meat, I went, oh boy, that's really lean meat. So you're going to find that, yeah, it's a lot of protein, but it's a very little fat. And that does not provide satiety for some people. And it sounds like for you, if you got hungry within 90 minutes of eating that, that's no bueno. And that's exactly what I learned last year when I did a lot of lean meats for my high protein experiment that I did. I found that I was so hungry. I would eat 5 chicken breasts and an hour later would be starving like I had not eaten in days. And yeah, it's not pretty when you're in that point. Kitty Caddick says, plus the micronutrients, they can play a role too. Absolutely they do. I'm certainly focusing in on the fat and protein, but Kat, you are exactly right. The micronutrition content of a grass-fed beef, for example, is far different than the macronutrient or micronutrient makeup of grain-fed beef. So yeah, that plays a huge role. So thank you for bringing that point in as well. Satiety is so much more than the macros. It's what the quality of that food is. Wirehead says carbs equals sugar equals insulin equals body fat. Yeah, sure is. Richard says, nothing fills me up like a bunch of green vegetables that are covered in butter, sour cream, cream cheese, or aged cheese. Eating 4 pounds of it at once helps keep me full, though. Yes, I would need to eat probably 4 pounds of that to be satiated. And one interesting thing about this carnivore experiment I've been doing is the elimination of carbohydrates altogether. Fascinating to me that most of the time my carb choices were green leafy vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, but even those could be stoking some hunger in some people. And people are, oh, you don't get hunger from that. Yeah, you want to bet? And it kind of changes this whole idea of vegetables necessarily being good for you. We've always heard that. We've always believed that. They even throw in fruits into there as well. But we'll lay aside the fruit one for now because most people in our community recognize that most fruits tend to have too much sugar. And so you're avoiding those. But with vegetables, people still think, oh, you don't get any micronutrients unless you eat the vegetables. And so that's changing, I believe. And the elimination of these things from my diet with now having a keto template carnivore is kind of changing the way I'm thinking about the role those vegetables were playing. I'm not anti-vegetable. I still think they're a good idea in general in minimal amounts for people who don't tolerate them well. But I do think they can feed gut flora and some of the other things. We're still learning, guys, is the bottom line here. So never stop learning. Finally, I caught you live, says Singles of Me. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for being here. Wirehead said, I've found I do best at 0 carbs with a 65% fat, 35% protein ratio. No hunger, but weight and fat loss will continue. World Carnivore Tribe #. Yeah. And see, yours is a little lower in fat and higher in protein than mine would be. But again, it goes back to that bio-individuality. And congratulations, finding your sweet spot is right there at 65% fat. Didn't clue in until today that the deer was too lean, hence hunger. Duh. It was locally shot and gifted to me. Back to fatty meat today. And some people think, okay, well, what if I add in fat to offset the leanness that is in meats like deer meat? Okay, a lot of people think that. The danger in that, though, is you have to add a lot of exogenous sources of fat, and thus you're adding in more energy to the plate than need be. It's a whole lot better if the fat is naturally occurring in whatever it is you're eating, which is why we say choose fattier cuts of meat and avoid the lean meats as much as possible. But it was free deer, so how could you turn it down, Steph? Downtown Vapors, I eat a ton of ground beef. I often worry about my overall nutrition. I do a pound a day most days, sometimes hungry, sometimes not. A pound's not that much. I ate 2 pounds of ribeye steak yesterday. Now, that's all I ate the whole day, but I had 2 pounds. So a pound of ground beef, what is that? 1,300 calories, 1,200 calories? So make sure you get enough calories. That's the other thing in this equation with satiety is people think, well, I'm eating high fat. Well, how much are you eating? Oh, I'm having 1,100 calories. So you can make the preponderance of your diet fat, but unless you're eating enough calories to nourish your body, of course you're going to be hungry. So that's the other thing too here, finding that balance between listening to your hunger signals, getting enough nutrition from fat and protein, mostly minimal carbohydrates, and then eating enough energy. But people are, oh, I don't want to eat too much. It would be very difficult if all you're eating mostly is fat and protein. If you're listening to satiety signals, it's almost impossible to overeat on those things because your body will just naturally stop you unless you blow by that satiety signal. So for me on this carnivore experiment, I've been posting my caloric intake, and it has ranged, you guys, from as low as 1,600 something calories to as high as 3,300 calories. I'm not counting the calories. For me, it's about what is my body telling me and what signals am I getting from my body telling me that that fat and protein that I just consumed is enough. And that's the sweet spot you're looking for with satiety on keto. Sandy John 5, day 5 of keto. I'm finding a hard time feeling satiated, too much fat, and I'm nauseated. Too much protein. I feel like I'm not truly doing keto. Well, Sandy, don't fool yourself into believing the latter, because subjectively, what does too much protein mean? I think you can obsess about it to the nth degree. If you're not getting satiation from your meals, generally, and you're only on day 5, so the full satiety doesn't really come until you're fully keto adapted, which can take 2 to 4 weeks. So be patient with yourself. Realize that you're on a new journey. I don't know how you ate before you came to keto, but if it was the standard American diet or if it was crap food, you got to kind of let the ramifications of that crap food get out of your system. That's where that 2 to 4 week period comes into play. I would err on the side, since you're brand new, I would err on the side of lowering your calories or carbs. Excuse me, don't lower your calories. Lowering your carbs, raising the fat. Those are the 2 things that I would focus on right now and stick with as much as possible real whole foods. And for now, count total carbs just so you kind of make sure you keep those carbs in check. You get the carbs down, you get the fat higher, you're going to find satiation will kick in. And let me know how that goes. If you have further questions, please PM me on Instagram here, or you can email me, livinglowcarbman@charter.net. But you're doing great. Don't stop eating the deer. Just cook it in butter, ghee, or duck fat. You can still have that great protein with delicious fat added. Yeah, Joshua, she could, but there is a concern that you could overeat on the fats if you do that. It's just better to try to get it all together. But I wouldn't discard the deer meat. Certainly your suggestion is not a bad idea. But henceforth, try to find fattier cuts of meat. All right. Still learning. We'll continue to learn. Joshua, never stop learning. I mean, I teach you guys here every day on Jimmy Rants, but that doesn't mean that I have just stopped learning and I am the purveyor of all things keto. No, I'm still learning too. Can you supplement with vitamins or anything else? Certainly. Why not? But that's not on topic with what we're talking about here today. The bottom line today, you guys, is there is this great debate online that you might have noticed regarding a ketogenic diet and about which macronutrient provides the most satiety. And it's a funny debate because people are like, oh, no, it's protein. Oh, no, it's fat. When the answer is it's both. It's that proper mix of both. And figuring out that proper mix of both is your job. Hey, Mississippi Keto, thanks for being here. I eat all the rendered fat with my pound of ground beef. Should I? Yeah, you absolutely should. Yeah, on my carnivore diet that I'm the keto carnivore, some people are like, well, you're not being accurate with people because you're not counting the fat left in the pan that you're not eating. I'm like, I'm pouring it on top of the food. So yes, I'm absolutely having the fat that's in the pan and counting everything that I'm consuming. So pretty funny. So find that mix, you guys, of the fats and the proteins that will give you the satiation you're looking for. Kimberly says, I guess it depends on how we are fueling our body. Always, always, which is why a carbohydrate restricted diet is first and foremost. And then you start tinkering with the protein and the fat. If you're still eating carbs of consequence on a carbohydrate restricted diet, which anything over 30 grams total carbs is carbs of consequence, that could throw a monkey wrench into your equation of trying to figure out, is it protein, a preponderance of protein or a preponderance of fat that gives the satiation? You got to cut the carbs way down to be able to feel that and to be able to sense that. So don't say, well, I'm having 40 grams of net carbs, which is actually about 60, 70 grams. I'm always hungry. And I'm like, okay, you've got to bring the carbs down and then start tinkering with the fat and the protein to figure out what your satiation level is. CM Davis 2302, I find that I crave red meat with butter on this program. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having butter on meat to provide satiety. And it means that your body's probably telling you you need a little higher fat than others. The greatest satiety will depend on the individual. Some people feel best with the fats while others proteins. Well said, Wirehead. Deborah Jane Rainey says, I always find if I'm a little extra hungry, I have a serving of nuts, which is protein and fat, and it does the job. For a lot of people, nuts do that. They do provide that satiety. Others get hungry eating nuts, which is why some people prefer to do animal-based fats and proteins to try to give them that satiation. It's a fascinating discussion, especially when you start talking about quality of proteins, quality of fats, because all of those things matter as well. And like my friend Katie Caddick said earlier, the micronutrition that would be in certain kinds of foods, those things matter as well. So this isn't an easy debate to come to a conclusion on. It's the totality of all the things we've talked about here today. After you've been on plan a while, says Keto Fasting MT, satiety seems to go really low, feel very full with little food. Is this okay? Well, if you feel very full with little food, my only caution would be don't undereat food because you will slow your metabolism. That's why getting ample fats with ample proteins in that mix, that's the key. That's what you're looking for. That's the nirvana in making sure that you're getting enough nutrition that will give you that satiation. The last thing you want to do is undereat, and then you have this intense craving for food because you didn't give your body enough fuel. That'd be the concern. Hello, Stephanie Dodier. Thanks for being here, sweetie. Nuts being the crunch factor that trigger pleasure for many people, it's a dopamine release, says Steph. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a big one. Thanks for bringing that in, Steph. Nuts make me want more and more nuts, Says Mississippi Keto, definitely a binge trigger for me. Yeah, usually on a traditional ketogenic diet, the things that are problematic for some people, it comes down to two big ones: nuts and cheese. Those are the two things that some people, their brain is wired that if they have a little bit of nuts, they have to have a lot of nuts. Some people, they have a little bit of cheese, they got to have a lot of cheese, and they never get that satiation. If you know that about yourself, you probably need to eliminate those from your diet so that you don't sabotage what you're trying to accomplish. Mississippi Keto says, I feel much better on meat and butter. I'm finding that too, doing this experiment that I'm doing. All right, guys, that's it for this Jimmy Rants. As always, go to jimmyrants.com. And once you're there, you can see we have one of the most unique shows on the internet. Lots of new people are coming to this show. So thank you if you are watching for the first time here on Instagram. Follow me at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. And you can engage live just like all these beautiful followers did here today. If you miss it on the lives, that's okay. We keep them up on replay for 24 hours, Instagram does. So watch it on the replay. But if you miss the replay or if you don't do Instagram, it's all good. We throw all of these past videos up on YouTube. So go type in Jimmy Rants, and you could even throw in a keyword search and find past videos that are maybe on a subject you want to hear about. So go watch them on YouTube. And then finally, we have the best of the best moments of this here show in podcast form on Apple Podcasts, coming soon to a lot more podcasting formats. But right now, just on Apple Podcasts, the Jimmy Rants podcast. Go check it out. JimmyRants.com. Steph says both nuts and cheese are dopamine foods. And she says cheese is a huge trigger for her. Yeah, definitely. Boss Philly says, you've inspired me to go carnivore, so thank you for that. Yeah, let me know how that goes. I'm doing pretty well with a keto template carnivore, not just carnivore. Carnivore tends to be a little bit on the higher protein, more moderate down in fat. I tend to do better with the flip, a little higher in fat, somewhere in that 75% range, and a little more moderate in protein, down around 20-25% range. So finding what works for you is the key. So guys, until next time, we'll see you then.